Hello and welcome to Business Live. Coming up, Ghana cedi loses 8.63% in value to the dollar since January this year, as Bloomberg says the delayed payment debt restructuring for commercial bondholders would weigh on the local currency. We shall be analyzing the impact of this on the economy. Also in this bulletin, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund urges the government to learn from the lessons of the economic shocks, particularly the debt default that ravaged the economy.
The main lesson from this experience is that you do the right thing now to build the strongest possible foundation for growth for Ghana.
Plus, MTN and Telecel report improvements in internet access as government vows to improve internet supply challenges facing the country.
They're working around the clock to look at alternatives to bring even more connectivity to us on this continent, and they are succeeding. So yes, it will take 5 weeks minimum for the problem to be solved completely, but in the interim, a lot of work is being done to ensure that our systems stay up.
We'll get to hear more from the Minister of Communications and Digitalization, plus go live with the Telecommunications Chamber on progress made so far. We have details of these and many others for you. Please stay. Thanks so much for your company. I am Pius Kojo Baka. We can now settle and look at our stories. This evening, the National Communications Authority has asked mobile network operators, known as the MNOs, to prioritize allocating more data resources to some institutions following the relative stability of internet services. These institutions include the Bank of Ghana, the Ghana Association of Banks, the Ghana Stock Exchange, and the Electricity Company of Ghana. Meantime, MTN Ghana and Telecel have reported some improvement in internet access to customers following days of near total blackout due to the massive subsea cable cuts that happened on Thursday, 14th March 2024. Now, government says it is working hard to improve the internet supply situation. It argued that some of these engagements and workings have helped to improve the situation when it comes to data services. Minister of Communications and Digitalization, Owusu says these alternatives should help improve the situation slightly in the coming days.
I'm sure we all can testify to the fact that it is better today to connect on the various internet-enabled platforms than it was on Thursday. So a lot has been done in these few days to look at ways to go around this problem. NCA is saying that it will take 5 weeks in the minimum for the cable that has been disrupted to be repaired and for full internet connectivity to be restored. It's not saying that it will take 5 weeks for us to get connectivity at all. Connectivity is there, we're all using it, but it's still impacted, it's still slow, it still goes off at times. So it will take 5 weeks for us to enjoy the full experience that we had before this issue came up. But even as we speak, the network operators, the regulator, they are working around the clock to look at alternatives to bring even more connectivity to us on this continent, and they are succeeding. So yes, it will take 5 weeks minimum for the problem to be solved completely, but in the interim, a lot of work is being done to ensure that our systems stay up.
All right, so let's track the progress made so far on this development and speak to the Chamber of Telecommunications. Its Executive Director and Engineer Kenneth Ashigbe joins us via Zoom for more on that. Thanks so much, sir. Now, first off, though, why these selected entities we are battling for limited internet accessibility, and now we are being told by the NCA that these institutions would have to be prioritized?
Was that addressed to me?
Yes, Kenneth Ashigbe, it's to you.
I didn't hear. Could you please repeat it?
All right. So I was asking why the NCA would select some institutions to, be prioritized by these MNOs for the meantime, by way of, improving the internet accessibility to them.
Well, so it's not as if the NCA is selecting. It's the fact that as a country, there are some facilities that are critical to you and I. What we do, we all would want technology, connectivity to do the things that we have to do. But when the financial sector grinds to a halt, you know what the implications would be. If you are not able to get water, if you're not able to get electricity, you know what the implications of that is going to be. So definitely, what you're looking at is ways in which you ensure that these very critical services that depend on connectivity are also, get the required within the limited space that you have, are able to get the connectivity that is required. And so how do we work together to ensure that that can happen?
And it appears we are making headway with the restoration of the internet services as rightly articulated by MTN Telecel, right?
Yes, so as the minister said, if you read the fourth update that the NCA gave, they talked about the fact that it was going to take 5 weeks to get the cable ships to the place, get divers down there to be able to start the repairing of the cables. But they also mentioned that in the coming days, there was work going to be done to ensure that we're going to get some restoration of service done. And so what the MNOs have been doing under the leadership of the NCA is looking for alternative capacity, looking to the east to using terrestrial fiber to be able to bring some capacity in, going as far as Angola, to be able to bring some capacity into the system to be able to improve connectivity. And we're beginning to see that happen. And it was really difficult doing that over the weekend, but still we got some capacities in, and we're beginning already to see the improvement of it. I'm sure on Thursday we could not have done this Zoom call if we attempted to do it on Thursday, but now it's beginning to happen. And so our members will continue to work to ensure that as we wait for those cables to be repaired, we are still able to bring some connectivity in to ensure that we are able to serve our customers. Because it's really, one of the things that we should bear in mind is that if you take the UN e-governance report, Ghana, in the west coast of Africa, Ghana is the top when it comes to the extent with which we are digitized. So there are a lot of services that are currently require connectivity to let happen. And so we definitely need to work to ensure that we are able to provide that level of connectivity to everybody. As we look at making sure that the systems of these critical infrastructure are up at the back end, you also need to provide the front end so that when customers also want to access them as well, they are also able to access them. So the issue of prioritization is really not an easy one to do, because you need to work on the back end, get these systems up and running, but you also need to also look at the front end as well. And it's the reason why we all need to, beyond just working on connectivity, we need to start also looking at localizing a lot of our infrastructure in country, so that, it would then, even without the external connections, the external connectivity, services like that would be improved. If you bear in mind, when Thursday, some of the services went down, there were particular services that were still running, because either they had cached some of their service locally, or they were working within the sub-region. And because bear in mind, when we lost connectivity to the west, there was still connectivity all the way to the east. So servers that were domiciled within the Nigerian, the ECOWAS space, still were running. And so these are the things that this particular incident, which is unprecedented, should be able to help us to become a lot more sufficient in terms of the critical services that we need to run our country, how do we build exchanges locally in such a way that we are able to run even when these unforeseen circumstances should arise.
All right, so in a minute, it's official now that this will be completed in about a month and a week's time for restoration to happen. But what sort of assurance can you give to internet users that indeed during this time period we've given, we will stick to it?
Well, you see, the thing about this thing is that nobody can give assurance. See, that's one of the things we need to bear in mind. The undersea cable providers are telling us 5 weeks, but we remotely have been able to tell that geological factors could have caused this. You still are waiting for the divers to actually go down there to see what actually is in there, and this is engineering. So you give your best scenarios and then try and work towards that. But the most important thing and the assurance that is being given is that we are all beginning to see the incremental improvement in the services. And so trust that working with the Minister of Communication and Digitalization and the NCA and the MNOs and all other players, we would strive to ensure that we continue to improve the level of connectivity that we have. And it's not just the issue of connectivity, it's also working with various players to ensure that the various changes that we need to do in terms of our setups we need to do.
All right.
But just bring to the fore the fact that telecommunication service is a human right. It's a critical infrastructure. So we all need to work to ensure that we protect it.
Very well. Thank you very much, Engineer Kenneth Ashigbe, for your time speaking to us on the subject matter. But let's switch topics to one other big story we are following up for you, because the Ghana cedi has lost 8.63% in value to the dollar since the beginning of this year as pressure continues to mount on the local currency. Bloomberg is predicting more tough times for the cedi as the debt restructuring with Eurobond holders drags. Here's more in this report.
The cedi has come under intense pressure in the past 3 weeks, falling heavily against the US dollar and other major foreign currencies. It lost more than 1.3% last week to the American greenback. Checks by Joy Business at Sun Forex Bureau indicates that the cedi is going for 13 cedis 60 pesos to the dollar. Bloomberg says the West may not be over for the local currency, which is Africa's third worst performing currency this year. The US-based firm said the cedi could continue to weaken despite the International Monetary Fund's $3 billion bailout following the country's 2022 debt default. Though the Bank of Ghana has been intervening in the spot market, the cedi's performance has been wobbling, raising concerns about the outlook of inflation.
Let's bring in research lead of GCB Capital, Courage Boti, on the back of this story. He joins us via Zoom as well. Thanks so much, Courage, for your time here on Business Live. Cedi lost 8.63% in value to the dollar since the beginning of this year. How significant is this loss and its impact on the real economy, you would say?
Good evening, Pius. It's not good for anybody if the cedi is falling sharply. As you alluded to, it has implications for cost of living, inflation, and things like that, really. So I don't think it's even the remotest expectation of anyone. 8% plus in 2 months and a half or so, nearly 3 months, compared to January alone in 2023, 21%. I think it's a relatively better performance, even if we would have wished it were a bit more stable than it is. And we know the issues, right? I mean, we are still locked up in negotiations to complete external debt restructuring. It all has consequences. We know that, yes, reserves may have improved in recent months, probably even ahead of what the IMF's expectation is at this point in time. But if you compare that reserve level to what it was probably start of year 2022, 2021 levels, they're about where we were safely clocking over 4 months of import cover versus as we have it now, 1.1 month if you look at net reserve and 2.7 if you look at gross reserve. It looks like the fundamentals relatively are a bit weaker now than they were maybe 2022, 2021 levels. And on that score alone, if we were to be recording depreciation on that score alone, probably things should have been a lot worse than it is now. but I think it's the interventions on the market, right? The Bank of Ghana's ability to manage things through the policy rate channel, through the intraday volatility smoothing interventions that they have been having on the market. And of course, we've seen progress on the fiscal side as well, where the macro seem to be improving. Inflation is on a good path down. We've seen fiscals also ahead of program targets. Domestic debt restructuring has effectively ended, and we are now making progress toward external. If all these elements come together, it should ensure some stability in the system going forward. I think among the many other factors, the coupon payment on the bonds, some 5.8 billion at a go released into the system, may have also fed into speculative demand to some extent, even if we do not have the hard data to back that at the moment, right? So I think it's a multiplicity of factors, but compared to what could have been, given the relatively weaker reserve position compared to 2022, 2021 levels, really, I think 8% year to date is quite okay relative to what could have been.
I see. Finally, before you go, though, Courage, now there's been concerns by some currency watchers that, look, this is temporal and that when all is said and done with the commercial bondholders, local currency would again bounce back. I don't know whether you share in that assertions.
I agree. In fact, let's give it up to the conclusion of external debt restructuring. What we've seen, you see, per accounting treatment, the little I know about that, once government has been able to meet two debt service on the domestic debt without challenges, serious challenges, the accounting treatment naturally will write back some of the impairment on those bonds, right? And so if we conclusively end the conversation around external debt restructuring and there is no more noise around that, you will begin to see hot money find their way into Ghana, trying to take advantage of the potential correction in pricing for local bonds that will happen in the coming months, right? And by hot money, I mean speculators, vulture funds, people who are looking for quick wins, really. You may begin to see some of those flow in once there are signs that valuations are improving. And that is what is likely to happen, I believe, in the next few months, really. So everything hinges on the conclusion of, or at least some progress with external debt restructuring. Let's get it going. Once the Eurobond deal is sealed with at least the investors and the fine details of the debt restructuring is not going, I want to think that there could be some inflows from the portfolio side into local currency debt, which will improve the liquidity condition on the market. Of course, we hold constant the fact that we are under program and the scale of deterioration needs stricter actions to reverse or correct. So maybe this year, my expectation is that the IMF program will provide a stricter backstop and we may not have slippages. If all these assumptions hold, I think that second half of the year, the CD may be a little more stable than we've seen so far in the first quarter.
Very well. Thank you very much, Courage Boti. We are indeed grateful for your time. Research lead of GCB Capital, speaking to us on the back of the performance of the CD. This is still Business Live. We've got more stories for you after this break. Hello, welcome back to Business Live. The Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, has urged the government to learn from the lessons of the economic shocks, particularly the debt default that ravaged the economy. Well, she's been speaking during a meeting with President Akufo-Addo.
For Ghana, because the country is coming from a difficult period of high debt and deficit, to great extent caused by the shock from COVID and then the sequence of shocks, the Russia war and the cost of living crisis. But also because, like many countries, Ghana did not appreciate the size of the shock. And in an election year, there was more done that fiscally the country was in a position to sustain. The main lesson from this experience is that you do the right thing now to build the strongest possible foundation for growth for Ghana. And that takes me to the world. We have seen the world economy being surprisingly resilient. Global growth this year is better than we anticipated a year ago.
And I'd like to bring in the views of an economist, Dr. Owusu, on some comments made by the IMF board, as you rightly heard, after meeting President Akufo-Addo. Thanks so much, sir, for your time here on Business Live. Now, the IMF is urging Ghana to learn from the lessons of the economic shocks, particularly the debt default, which ravaged the economy, etc. These are in order, right? Unmute for me, sir.
Yes, sorry. Yes. The call is in order. We have gone through difficult economic situations since the beginning of 2022, when Ghana wasn't able to go to the Eurobond market to raise any bonds. That affected our cedi, it affected our debt levels, and we have also have to go and seek an IMF program. And then before the IMF program, there was a debt restructuring, this haircut issue, where domestic bondholders had to sacrifice in order to position the country in a sustainable path for us to secure the IMF program. So we have taken the bitter pill, and we don't have to go back to these difficult situations again. We have to manage our economy prudently so that we don't go back to the difficult times that we were. And I think it's a good call. She mentioned the difficulties, especially in election years, where governments have disregarded the fiscal discipline and have gone out to spend inefficiently. So, yeah, it's a good call that the government and all stakeholders have to come together and manage the economy and make sure that never again would we go back to the dark days where our cedi was depreciating close to 50%, inflation was around 54%, debt levels were rising, fuel price was rising, transport fares rising, everything was very hot in the economy. Never again should we go back to those days. You also saw how Bank of Ghana had to step in, with liquidity support of, and that made them lose about 60 billion cedi. So things were difficult in the last 2 years, and I think that is a good call that we don't return to the dark days, as we may call it.
Dr. Owusu, looking at the IMF, sticking to financial or fiscal prudence is very much important to the fund. Do you think that government is committed to do that, bearing in mind that we are in an election year?
Yes, I think so far government has shown commitment to the IMF program. It's even evident in the IMF report, in their first review. They commended the government for showing commitment. But so the economy is on the path of recovery. The fiscal discipline is on course. I must say this, that we haven't gotten back to the pre-IMF levels. In other words, the pre-COVID levels, the 2018-2019 figures. But things are improving. Let's take them one after the other. The fiscal consolidation is the number one pillar of this IMF program, i.e., trying to ensure a narrow gap between revenue and expenditure, which will, in the end, slow down borrowing. And the target for the 3-year program was 5.1 percentage points reduction in the budget deficit. And the government has already achieved 70% of it in the year 2023 alone. And this was a deliberate attempt by the IMF and the government to ensure that they achieve a greater part of the fiscal consolidation in the year 2023 alone, because they had to make allowance for extra budgetary allocations in the year 2024, also because of elections. So the allowance has already been made. The room has already been made for the government to up its expenditure in terms of nominal figures. So it has been accounted for in all the IMF projections for the coming years. But so in nominal terms, government is expected to increase its expenditure compared to 2023. But as a ratio of GDP, there is still a 6 percentage point reduction of the budget deficit. So this is a clear indication of the commitment to the IMF, to the fiscal consolidation. The number 2 reason why I think the government is on course is the returning or the reassuming or assumption of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, where the government is not supposed to spend more than 5% of GDP. The government is not supposed to incur budget deficit of not more than 5% of GDP.
All right.
And then the third reason is the 0% financing from the central bank. So now the government cannot overspend, because even if you overspend, you're not going to get any financing from the central bank.
All right. Thank you very much. We are indeed grateful, sir, for your time speaking to us on Business Live. We shall follow up on that. And that's it for the bulletin. I am Pius Kojobaka. See you same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.